Good afternoon, First World citizens. My name is Chance. I'm an 18-year-old freshman at Oregon State University. This right here will be known as Dorm Room Contemporaries, and today I will be talking about college tuition. I'm going to be up front. This is my first video of this kind, so please bear with me. Warning, much facts, such thoughts, rhetorically biased American from this point on. So as I'm sure it is for most of you other college students, fall registration, the end of the term, has given me both time and reason to consider my monetary devotion to this university, such as my recently developed habit for signing master promissionary notes in exchange for cheeseburgers and the ability to register for next term. If you don't know what an MPN is, or how it gets one cheeseburgers, this video probably doesn't apply to you, in which case, here is a link to Zombie Survival Guide, clearly a much more applicable subject. So to kick off the discussion on unreasonably high tuitions, I think it's a good idea to first look into the history of tuition costs. Let's go back 100 years to when your great-grandpappy theoretically enrolled in the undergraduate program at the University of Pennsylvania in 1913. The university's archives say he would have paid anywhere from $355 to $885, roughly the cost of a car at the time, for room and board, tuition, supplies, and fees, all the stuff otherwise known as cost of attendance. Whereas in 2013, you would pay anywhere from $51,100 to $61,800 to attend the same university and perhaps even stay in the same housing hall. So unless someone at UPenn has been haphazardly adding zeros, in the last 100 years, they've had anywhere from a 10.5 thousand to a 14.4 thousand% increase in cost of attendance, which may seem like a lot, but when compared to the nationwide average inflation of 2.3 thousand% since 1913, that's bath salts crazy. I used an online inflation calculator to put these numbers into perspective. If the cost of attendance at UPenn had risen according to the average inflation, it would currently only be $8,000 to $14,000 a year, which is by no coincidence the current cost of a car. So in 1913, your great-grandpappy contemplated the worth of an education in comparison to that of a car, but because tuition didn't grow in proportion to the cost of everything else, today's students get to choose between 1 year of education and 37 acres of their own private island in Canada. When you consider the perks of free health care and the lack of Dinkelberg neighbors, this decision seems to take care of itself. Now many of you may think, well, obviously today's education is worth more because it's better, right? So I ran a quick search on Google and found one of Kim Clark's articles published by US News, and although it wasn't the Clark Kent reporting I mistook it for, she does do a good job explaining the causes of tuition hikes. Sadly enough, tuition hikes are most affected by spending on administrators, student support services, and reductions in government subsidies. While both better staff and better student services sound like steps towards better education, the article found that lesson spending has actually decreased while tuition has exploded. Furthermore, these student services account for everything from meditation centers to mandatory dormitories, such as at Oregon State, all of which are costly and have no direct contribution to the betterment of education. So yes, education has bettered with time, but only in the same way zombie preparation has. That is, it's gotten a recreational twist, more prestige, and more popular. Lastly, if the government is helping less, it only makes sense that the student would have to pay more. However, the reasoning behind this relation of increased tuition and less government funding isn't as straightforward as the conclusion itself. Although it makes sense that if the government funded education, the students would have to pay less, this model only works with the assumption that the price is set. As most businesses, colleges understand that there is an amount of money which individuals are comfortable paying for their slice of the developed world. Furthermore, colleges know that more often than not, this amounts to the entire financial abilities of the student. Because of the supply and demand situation in which the demand for education is extremely high, and the supply is however much colleges wish to supply. What this economic situation boils down to is a store selling children a lifetime supply of candy. The children will pay whatever they can to work out a deal in which a one-time expenditure results in infinite reaping. Such is the case with students pursuing a college education. So if the university knows what a student can pay, then the university will charge exactly that amount and nothing more, knowing that doing so would result in the student's inability to attend the university. However, when a child's parent or the government comes down to the store and offers to pay for part of the child's lifetime candy supply, the store then knows that they can charge what the parent is willing to supply in addition to the amount the child can afford. This is the same case with college tuition and government funding. So although students would like the government's money to lessen their burden, it actually results in a system in which every dollar the government supplies raises the tuition by $1. Silly government. Keep in mind that they portray this situation as though it's helpful, as though they are enabling students otherwise incapable of attending universities to do so, when in reality, many students, such as myself, are forced to accept government loans because the availability of such loans increases tuition to an unobtainable level by the student independently. However, these loans are not interest-free. So the government is now making 5% annual interest on a loan that I wouldn't have needed if they never offered it to me in the first place. Side note, capitalism is a beautiful thing. Alright, so I know some of you are thinking, Chance, you said the cause of tuition mountains was the withdrawal of federal funding. And yes, I did, but withdrawal of federal funding implies that the funding was there, made its tweak, and was then withdrawn. So the price is still set with government aid in mind, but the student gets the bill. Okay, so tuition is higher than it could be if everybody on this rock wasn't so greedy. But what's to say that it's not worth the cost? I, just like the rest of you, made the decision that borrowing whatever it took was a good idea. Regardless, we still all feel uneasy about this, as though this debt is a necessary evil. Assuming that you're going to school to get your first degree, your current job opportunities are both slim and unattractive. So after 10 years of government-mandated education and 2 years of, fuck it, I'm too close to quit, why is it that education is suddenly a good idea? Well, it's because right after high school, we're faced with our first turd sandwich and giant douche life decision. That is, our options suck. Either we borrow buckets and live one step above the homeless until our education is finished, or we get a job and live one step above the homeless indefinitely. Seriously, the average weekly earning of an American without a college degree was $638 in 2011. That's less than $200 above the poverty line for the average family. Also, note that this average includes billionaire Bill Gates and millionaires such as Will Smith. Such outliers mean that most individuals in the pool actually make far less than the average earning. Now look at the weekly earnings for those of young adults with at least a 4-year, which is $961. However, this average includes no one over 34, so presumably there are less unreasonably average billionaires here. It's the comparison of these two averages that make a college education in current society all but a need. However, if this education was a need, we would expect it to be mandated by the government. Yet, the average weekly earnings of young adults with only the 10 years of government-mandated education was $439 in 2011. So, the 10 years of needed education earns you poverty when the privilege of college education earns you $522 more every 7 days. And while I can't speak for you, I'm absolutely appalled that in order to earn more than poverty and what we were taught is the fairest nation in the world, you have to be downright privileged. For those of you considering that school isn't a privilege because the government offers loans, consider where you would be if your buddy Kevin couldn't wait till Friday for you to pay for those bags. Certainly not clutching them Funyuns. Before I enrolled in OSU's engineering program, I worked at McDonald's for minimum wage. If I was lucky enough to be scheduled 40 hours a week, which literally never happened the entire time I worked there, I would have only earned $18,500 a year, before taxes. Subtract minimalized living expenditures, aka no car, no insurance, a roommate, and a perpetually empty fridge, and I could save $260 a month. This means that after 8 years of working every holiday and never having a single unexpected expenditure, I could pay my first year of college. Which really isn't so bad, because if I started working now, I could have my degree before I turned 55. So clearly tuition prices are set such that either you are privileged or you sign a contract saying that you will pay either the government or someone else for putting you through school. Fair enough, right? Well, besides the money they get for offering the loans, the government benefits a few other ways from your education. The first being that you are no longer contributing to the population of those under the poverty level. A population that drains a staggering $529 billion worth of welfare from federal, state, and local governments every year. Now the government is still going to tax you, but now that you make more money, they're going to tax you accordingly. Roughly $7,500 more a year than if you earn minimum wage. With each educated individual costing government less and earning them more, it raises the question, why isn't a secondary education a national investment? Especially when you consider that this is how we view a primary education, which, as I pointed out earlier, is a lot less lucrative. What I'm getting at here is that these loans are the equivalent of that buddy Kevin flowing those underweight bags just because he knows you'll share. All those grants and loans show that the federal government benefits enough to fund us going to school. The only problem is their half-assed solution of aiding students monetarily. College tuition goes up with the government funding because colleges are independent businesses, meaning education institutions fully intend to make as much as possible. Thus the reason they jack prices up when they could just as well educate students for no local cost with the federal money. Plain and simple, education institutions will never have it in their interest to lower attendance costs, that is, until it drastically affects their attendance rates. However, if our government instituted a secondary education program, monetarily similar to our primary education program, it is possible that they could offer free education and still benefit from doing so. A free option for secondary education would also lower attendance rates at private institutions, forcing them to lower their tuitions. Of course, a lot of details would need to be worked out for it to be free, but the point is, the lower the cost of attendance, the better for society. Or maybe it's not. Consider if we let the current setup run another 100 years. Your great-grandchild will be choosing between a school year and whatever $9 million buys at the time, perhaps his own planet. And if at this point you're not convinced that tuition is too high, I'm going to chalk it up to your 1% social status, assuming that there is no way I can convince you a $200 belt is unreasonable. Regardless of whether you agree or disagree, thanks for watching and thanks for seeking entertaining information. I hope this video met the criteria. Per convention, the links to anything not from my brain are at the bottom. And once again, my name is Chance. This has been Dorm Room Contemporaries. Be sure to enjoy your petrol-powered day and don't stop questioning.